couple of videos ago, I posted a video about top tactics for Chesapeake spawning yellow perch and talked a lot about the float and fly. I talked a little bit about using paddle tail grubs on lightweight jig heads for yellow perch. Today I want to talk about another type of presentation that some circumstances necessitate. And in fact, so far this year, the reports I have are that this particular tactic has been the most effective tactic. So we'll talk about this tactic. I'll show you how to tie it up and what to do with it. And if you will find yourself in a situation where, plan A is the float and fly, or plan B is the paddle tail grub on a light jig head, and those aren't producing fish, you may want to go to this option. So let's take a look at what's involved and we'll talk about how to use it. So what this is a drop shot approach to present two small perch lures, very much the same types of lures that we would use under the float in the float and fly, but we're going to present them in a drop shot style. And you'll see here I have a split shot as my drop shot weight, and we're going to tie these up with essentially two dropper loop type loops, which we will cut and turn into individual lines coming off the main line as opposed to just the loops. And then we will tie our jigs to those lines, and we'll have two jigs down running in close proximity to the bottom on this drop shot type presentation. So you'll see I've got some 12-pound test fluorocarbon here. I don't believe fluorocarbon is absolutely necessary for this setup. As I've said in my other top tactics for yellow perch video, a lot of the water you're fishing is going to be pretty stained, potentially muddy, and not the kind of water where having really delicate presentations is required. However, I do have this fluorocarbon and we'll use it for this particular rig. We'll start by taking somewhere around 2.5 feet to 3 feet of line that we will use to tie our rig. So that's going to be step number one. The next thing we'll do is from either end of the segment of line you've got, you will go down about 10 inches or so and make a simple loop in the line, and then tie the beginning of a surgeon's knot. So you loop the line over and pull it through. You want to leave about 3 or 4 inches of loop exposed. And then you want to go ahead and take that loop and continue to wrap it through about 4 more times through the hole. So that's 1 more time, 2 more times, 3 more times, and 4 more times. All right, so you've got 5 total wraps. Then you take that loop and you go ahead and you pull it tight with equal pressure on the loop and on the 2 lines coming out. What you will now have is your top line, your bottom line, and a loop coming off of that bottom line, like that. Go ahead and pull it down tight, and that's what you'll have. I know it's hard to see because I'm using clear line, but you'll have the loop here, you have the top line, and then you have the line going out from the bottom. So that's their first dropper loop, or your first, what's going to become your first line to tie your first jig to. That's step number 2. All right, so for our next step, we repeat the same exact process about 8 inches or 10 inches down the line. So we will fold the line over, we will basically begin to tie a surgeon's knot where we loop it over, and then pull that through, and then wrap it 4 additional times. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then go ahead and pull that tight. So now we have a second loop. So that would be step 3. And now what we have is a single line with 2 loops coming off of it. Once you have your line with the 2 loops in it, you will go to one of the loops, doesn't matter which one exactly, and you will identify the bottom of the loop, the one that's going to be the part of the loop that's coming out of the knot. You can see it against my thumb there on the bottom, and you will just take your clippers and you will go to that and you will clip it nice and snug to the knot like that. By clipping that loop, you will now have a single strand coming off of the main line as opposed to having it be a loop. That will be where you attach your first jig, just using whatever your favorite knot is to attach the lure to your line. Okay, so we now have the lure, the top lure attached to the line. You'll see I've used a homemade 1/32 ounce crystal flash jig that I've made up here as my top lure in orange, because orange has been a very good color for these yellow perch so far this spring. For our next step, we will repeat the exact same process with the lower loop. We will be cutting the loop at the bottom of the loop so that it becomes a single strand coming out from the loop knot. And then we'll be tying our bottom jig. In this case, I've got a simple trout magnet with chartreuse grub body, and we'll be tying that again using our favorite knot to tie lures to the line. Okay, so now we have successfully attached our 2 jigs on our what formerly were loops and are now just individual lines coming off of the main line. And it sort of looks like this. You will attach the top of this setup to your main line of your rod and reel, and on the bottom you will simply take your split shot, or if you want to use a different kind of proper drop shot sinker, you can do that too. Fishing in the areas we fish, a heavy split shot is probably fine. You can even put a second split shot on there if you would like, and put a little more weight on there, and then adjust as the current starts to run or backs off over the course of the day. The tide starts to really move, you add a split shot, the tide starts to wane a little bit, and you can take it off and adjust your rig to get the right weight. The goal is to use the least amount of weight you can use and still stay in contact with the bottom. So you just keep that in mind, and whether that means you switch out your drop shot weights or you add split shots in the bottom of the rig, whatever you do. The other thing is, if a split shot on a rig like this gets hung up on the bottom, it's very likely to be something you can just pull hard and it'll slide off the bottom of the line and save the rest of your rig, so you don't lose the rest of your rig. So there we have our completed setup. You've seen how to tie the rig. How do you fish the rig? You cast it out, you let it sink to the bottom, and you can either work the rod tip with very slight movements without moving the sinker on the bottom, or more traditionally, you would twitch the rod tip very slightly, which will impart action on both jigs that are part of the rig, and you will be moving it towards you in a very, very slow pace, crawling that sinker, that split shot, across the bottom as you retrieve it in very, very slowly. It allows you to keep your lure very near the bottom, but to move the rig through the water very, very slow. The double jig drop shot setup has been very effective so far this year. The fish tend to be holding right near the bottom so far this year, and it is very difficult to move a reeled lure slowly enough to get it down near the bottom and keep it in a position where it's not right on the bottom picking up garbage or getting hung up. And this double jig drop shot approach allows you to put your lures in very close proximity to the bottom at a constant depth and move them slowly. And in this cold weather and the cold water at the beginning of the perch season, the speed of the retrieve and the proximity to the bottom can be essential. So this has been a great rig so far this year. It works really well in deeper water when you can't really do the float and fly because there's too much depth to get the jig down to where the fish are holding, and you can't do a free retrieved lure because you have to reel it too fast to keep it in the right proximity to the bottom. So give this a try. If plan A doesn't work, plan B doesn't work, try plan C, the double jig drop shot for perch in the Chesapeake creeks and rivers during the spring spawning run. I think you'll like the outcome. As always, it's the Brandywine Angler, Manly Parks. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.